The house was silent. The only sound was the relentless chirping of crickets outside. I had just gotten into bed, tucked myself in, turned off the lights, and was reading a book when I began to feel uneasy. At first, I couldn't pinpoint why I was scared. I lived in a small, quiet town, and nothing ever happened here. But as I lay there listening to the crickets, my heart started to pound in my chest and my breathing became shallow and quick. And just as I began to calm myself, telling myself there was nothing to be afraid of, that it was just my imagination, I saw it. There was a shadow at my window. I sat up in bed, confused and a little frightened. Had I left the window open? No, I had closed it earlier. I told myself not to be silly. It was probably just a branch from the tree outside scraping against the glass. But as I watched, the shadow took on a shape. It was a face pressed up against my window, staring directly at me. I don't remember if I screamed or if I just stared back in shock, but what I do remember is my heart pounding in my chest so hard I thought it would burst. Frozen with fear, I watched as the face remained motionless, its eyes boring into mine. I tried to make sense of what I was seeing, but I couldn't. There was no face in the window before. I had been sitting right here reading just moments ago, and I would have seen someone approaching. The window was clear, and the street light outside illuminated everything clearly. So how could I not have seen him or her or whatever it was before? And why were they hiding in the shadows now? As I watched, the face seemed to grow larger and I could make out more details. It was a man. He was young, maybe in his mid-20s, with short dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes were dark and sunken, and he had a small cut or perhaps a burn scar under his left eye. He wore a black t-shirt and dark jeans. I couldn't see his shoes, but I could see his hands. They were long and skeletal, with fingers that were far too thin for his age. Time seemed to stop. All I could do was stare at the man in the window as he stared back at me. I wanted to scream, to run to the other side of the room and hide under the bed, but I couldn't move. It was like the fear had frozen me, held me captive in my own body. And then, after what felt like an eternity, the man in the window blinked. He turned his head slightly, and then he was gone. The shadow lifted from the window, and the face that had been leering at me was replaced by the familiar outline of the tree branches. I stayed in bed, paralyzed with fear, listening intently for any sound, waiting for the face to reappear, but it never did. The rest of the night passed without incident, and the next morning I got up and went about my day as if nothing had happened. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I had been tired and overworked, and that my mind had played tricks on me. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I had seen the man in the window, and no amount of rationalization was going to change that. As the day wore on, the memory of the man in the window faded, and I began to convince myself that it had all been a dream. But then, a week later, it happened again. I was lying in bed at night when I saw a shadow at my window. I turned my head, and there he was, the man from my nightmare, staring at me with those dark, sunken eyes. This time, he mouthed two words, "Let me in," then he was gone. So here's what I've learned. Sometimes fear doesn't need an explanation. It's enough that it's real and close, because the thing about fear is that it doesn't care how much sense it makes. It just knows that it's there, and sometimes that's all it takes. A small whisper in the darkness can be enough to send shivers down your spine. A fleeting glimpse of something out of place can trigger a primal response in your gut. And that's exactly what happened to me. I didn't need to understand the shadow at my window. I didn't need to know why it was there or what it meant. All I needed to know was that it was real, that it was close, and that it was mine. The fear itself was enough to wake me up, to make me feel alive, to remind me that I am small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things, and maybe that's what fear does. Maybe it's there to put things in perspective, to humble us, to remind us that we don't always have to be in control. Sometimes we just need to sit back, shut up, and listen to the whispers in the darkness.